they never see it coming. The most devastating blow to someone's confidence is not a shout, not a public humiliation, not even an insult. It is the quiet withdrawal of certainty, the subtle erosion of their self-belief until they stand in front of you, doubting their own shadow. Machiavelli understood that true power does not crush, it corrodes. You do not fight their ego, you make it collapse under its own weight. This is the art of psychological disarmament. To destroy someone's confidence so quietly they think it was their idea. Power begins in silence. The first step to disarming another person's confidence is to stop feeding it. Every word of praise, every flash of attention, every reflexive nod builds their sense of self. When you quietly remove these reinforcements, you create a vacuum they cannot name. They lean forward, they search your face, they rehearse their sentences before speaking. In this space of uncertainty, you do nothing aggressive. You simply withdraw. It feels to them like being stranded in a room where the walls keep moving farther away. They second-guess jokes. They doubt their abilities. They question how others perceive them. This is not about cruelty but control. You are training their mind to detach from its usual anchors and drift into self-scrutiny. The more calmly you hold your silence, the louder their inner noise becomes. They will replay your non-reactions again and again, amplifying their own insecurity without your having said a word. Machiavelli wrote that those who appear tranquil wield the greatest threat because they force others to expose themselves. By staying still, you allow them to project their fears onto you, and those fears will do the damage for you. True psychological disarmament begins not with a strike, but with an absence. The absence of approval, the absence of clarity, the absence of reaction. In this void, even the proudest persona starts to tremble. Never attack directly. That is the first rule of psychological disarmament. When you confront someone head-on, even if they are wrong, even if they are weak, you give them something dangerous. A position to defend. Machiavelli warned that an open assault, especially on the ego, grants your target clarity. And clarity breeds resistance. You don't want resistance, you want erosion. So instead of striking, you circle. You let the person reveal themselves. You let them feel safe, even admired, while you slowly pull at the threads that hold them together. A direct insult might spark anger, might even win you applause, but it also gives them a weapon to fight back. An indirect implication, a subtle dismissal, a look that lingers too long or not long enough. These are the tools of someone who plays to win without a fight. You say less, you say just enough. And when you do speak, you speak with ambiguity that forces their mind to work overtime. Interesting choice, you might say, or that's one way to do it. These are not insults. They are mirrors, distorted just enough to make the other person keep adjusting their reflection. This is how you make someone undo themselves. They begin to seek your approval, even if they won't admit it. They start to overcorrect, to explain more than needed, to compete with ghosts only they can see. The beauty of indirect disarmament is that you remain untouched. You are the calm presence in the room, while they stumble through their own fog. And the more they try to pull you into a confrontation, the more you refuse to meet them there. You don't match their energy. You don't return their tone. You just remain there, still, unshaken. And they begin to wonder why. They begin to doubt what they said, how they said it, if they offended you, if they're falling behind. By not attacking, you plant the seed that maybe, just maybe, they are not worth attacking. And that thought is far more brutal than anything you could have said out loud. Confidence, like armor, grows stronger when struck. but left untouched, it rusts in silence. That is your goal, not to fight their ego, but to make it question whether it was ever real. So you stay quiet, move sideways, and let them swing into empty air. When they finally crumble, it won't be because you broke them. It will be because they broke themselves trying to hit someone who was never even there. Confidence does not require direct praise to grow. It only needs inclusion. A glance, a nod, a seat at the table. So if you want to destroy someone quietly, start by denying them that inclusion, not dramatically, not with a scene. Simply make them invisible in the smallest ways possible. Speak to everyone in the room except them. Ask questions and skip over their expertise. Make the others laugh, then turn your face away when they try to join in. This kind of subtle exclusion is poison for the insecure. It creates an atmosphere where they begin to question not only how others see them, but whether they exist in the eyes of power at all. That doubt is lethal. People crave affirmation even more than truth. When you exclude someone silently, they cannot accuse you of mistreatment. There is no evidence, no sharp words, no bruises, only a cold vacuum where presence should have been. That is why this tactic works so well, because you are not the villain, they are simply not seen, and the brain hates that. The mind would rather be attacked than ignored, because at least attack is acknowledgement. What you are doing is more cruel. You are denying them the stage they believe they deserve. Slowly, they begin to shrink to fit the role you've assigned them. They lower their voice. They take up less space. They hesitate before offering ideas, glancing around to check if anyone even cares. They begin apologizing for things they didn't do, unsure if they're bothering the room just by existing in it, and all you've done is nothing. Machiavelli understood that influence often comes not from force, but from the quiet manipulation of perception. By controlling who gets light, you shape the shadows. When others see you overlooking them, they begin to mirror it. Social cues are contagious. Soon, your target finds themselves surrounded not by enemies, but by indifference, and that is far worse. Confidence cannot grow without reflection. It feeds on recognition. It needs warmth. You are denying it all without ever lifting a blade. So let them sit in the meeting unseen. Let them send messages that never get replies. Let them try just a little too hard to be noticed and watch how fast they lose the respect they're trying to earn. People think humiliation is loud, but the most dangerous humiliation is quiet. It's the kind that makes someone walk out of the room and wonder if they were ever really in it. To weaken someone without ever appearing hostile, you must master the art of strategic underestimation. This is not about insults or mockery. Those are too obvious, too reactive. This is about subtle misplacement, the kind that slips under their skin and rewrites their sense of worth. When someone performs well, act mildly surprised. When they speak, act as if you expected something else. If they share their credentials, respond with neutral politeness, not admiration. The goal is not to destroy what they've done, but to frame it as less than expected. Let them feel like they've just earned a compliment for tying their shoes. A powerful way to do this is through selective recognition. Praise others around them often, clearly, and publicly. Then, when it comes to them, offer silence or vague acknowledgement. "Oh, I didn't know you were working on that," you might say, even if you did. "Not bad," you might offer, then pivot the conversation without elaboration. These are not attacks. They're fragments of underestimation that pierce deeper because they come wrapped in calm. Over time, this builds a quiet identity crisis. They begin to ask themselves why your praise feels so lukewarm. why others seem more valued in your eyes, why no matter how well they perform, the reaction is always just a little too flat. This creates a hunger for approval, and hunger is the beginning of dependence. What you're doing is not rejecting them, it's placing them in a lower frame of worth without their consent. And worse, without explanation, the human mind cannot resist trying to solve the puzzle of how it is being perceived. That puzzle is your leverage. Machiavelli wrote that perception shapes power more than performance. By acting unimpressed, even when someone has clearly done well, you place yourself above their effort. You become the unspoken authority they cannot please, the standard they cannot read. And eventually, they begin to perform not for success, but for your reaction. This is how you control without commanding. You have made them internalize your doubt, and that doubt becomes their compass. You are no longer just a person in the room. You are the mirror that never smiles. The silence that speaks louder than applause is far more powerful than any confrontation. Because when someone believes they are being quietly looked down upon, they will try to rise, but in the process, they overextend, overthink, and eventually self-sabotage. You didn't push them, you simply acted like they were never that high to begin with. And now, they will spend their energy chasing a validation you never offered and never will. Doubt spreads like a virus, but it doesn't begin with words, it begins with atmosphere. If you want to erode someone's confidence without ever confronting them, you must build an echo chamber of quiet uncertainty around them. You don't speak against them. You don't roll your eyes or call them out. You simply plant a seed of hesitation in others and let that seed grow unnoticed. The trick is subtle. When they speak, you glance at someone else just for a second. When they make a decision, you pause a little too long before nodding. If they tell a story, respond with a tight-lipped smile instead of laughter. These are not mistakes. They are cues, social cues, that tell the room something is off, and the room will begin to mirror you. Humans are pack animals. We read emotion before we process logic. If someone feels subtly dismissed by the group, their confidence doesn't just falter, it collapses from the inside. This is not about turning others against them loudly. That's too visible, too confrontational. It's about training the group to treat them like background noise. Slowly, they will notice that people stop turning toward them when they speak. Their ideas get picked up only when someone else repeats them. They become a ghost at the table, heard but not echoed. And in that silence, self-doubt thrives. The victim doesn't know who to blame, so they turn inward. Maybe I talk too much. Maybe I'm not as sharp as I thought. Maybe I lost the room and didn't even notice. That spiral is the weapon, and you never had to draw blood. Machiavelli knew that influence doesn't come from power alone, but from shaping the mood in your favor. You do not need to attack someone's words. You simply shift how those words land. You distort the echo, and as their words return to them softer, colder, ignored, they begin to shrink into themselves. That is the genius of psychological disarmament. It's not a war of force. It's a theatre of subtle reactions. The target is never sure if they're being mistreated or imagining things. They become paranoid without evidence, desperate without reason, defensive without provocation. You have made them unstable in a room that appears completely calm, and that instability will make others distrust them even more. No one wants to follow someone who seems shaken, so the group withdraws and the silence grows louder. You didn't raise your voice. You didn't play dirty. You simply changed the air they breathe. Confidence cannot survive where doubt echoes louder than applause. And you never touched them. You just made the room stop clapping. Confidence feeds on comparison. It does not exist in isolation. It survives by measuring itself against others and finding reassurance in being valued. To disarm someone psychologically, you must manipulate this comparison. Do it by withholding validation from them, and then deliberately over-validate someone else in their presence. Make it effortless. Make it public. Give praise so warm and specific to another that it fills the room. You handled that beautifully. I'm always impressed by how sharp you are. That's exactly the kind of initiative we need. Then when your target speaks, go quiet. Offer only a vague nod or a flat thanks. This contrast does all the work. It doesn't matter if the praise is deserved. What matters is that they feel the shift, the imbalance, the sudden absence of attention that once belonged to them. It stings in a way they can't admit, because you're not insulting them. You're not ignoring them entirely. You're just not impressed. And that subtle lack of enthusiasm speaks louder than any attack. The human brain is wired to scan for status. When someone else is visibly elevated in the social hierarchy, and they are not, your target begins to feel the floor shift beneath them. Even if they act unaffected, inside they are recalculating, reassessing, wondering what they missed. That's the trap. They'll try to win back your recognition by speaking more, offering new ideas, stepping into spaces they normally wouldn't. But the harder they try, the more obvious their need becomes. And once someone appears needy in pursuit of approval, the group's perception of them changes. They're no longer confident. They're seeking something, and seekers are never seen as powerful. This is how you reverse the dynamic. You make them try for what you do not offer. You build the illusion that your respect is not earned through effort, but through qualities they must not possess. Machiavelli understood the value of symbols in social control. By praising one and withholding from another, you turn praise into currency, and your target begins to feel broke. They become hyper-aware of who you admire and desperate to become that image. But you keep moving the goalposts. The more they reach, the more distant your approval becomes. And because you never criticize them directly, they have no way to fight back, no clear wound, only a growing sense that they are not enough. Not compared to the ones you elevate, not anymore. That kind of subtle deprivation is more effective than any insult. It makes them believe they've fallen, and no one noticed but them. Compliments can kill if you deliver them with a dull edge and a crooked smile. Most people think praise builds confidence, but Machiavelli would argue otherwise. Praise can be used as a weapon when you control the tone, the timing, and the implication. You do not flatter your target directly. That would feed them. Instead, you offer compliments laced with questions, disguised as recognition but soaked in condescension. That was actually pretty good for you. You handled that better than I expected. I didn't think that would work, but you pulled it off. These aren't praises, they're traps. What you're doing is planting a subtle narrative that any success they achieve is an exception, not the rule. That they've surprised you not because they've improved, but because they've momentarily escaped your low expectations. These compliments sting, not because they are harsh, but because they can't be openly challenged. To fight back would make them look petty. To ignore it would let the doubt settle deeper. Either way, you've placed them in a bind. This is psychological disarmament at its finest. You make them question their progress, even in moments of triumph. You shift the spotlight so that it only half reaches them, casting more shadow than light. And when they look for confirmation, when they glance around for others to affirm their success, you remain calm, detached, maybe even distracted. That distance becomes louder than words. It tells them their win is small, forgettable, barely worth noticing. Over time, this distorts their inner calibration. Even when they succeed, they start second-guessing the result. Was it luck? Was it really good? Did anyone else even notice? The more they question their wins, the less they trust themselves. And a person who doubts their own success will never fight for greater power. They'll shrink to the level of validation you allow. That's how you hold control, by becoming the scale they measure themselves against, even when the scale is rigged. Machiavelli never advocated cruelty for its own sake. He advocated strategy, and this method isn't cruelty, it's calculation. You're not hurting them. You're simply shaping their sense of value with small, precise tools. And the best part, they'll never accuse you of being unfair. Because on paper, you praised them. But under the surface, you made sure the compliment sounded like surprise, like doubt, like a mistake they weren't expected to make again. And that's what they'll remember. Not the praise, but the quiet implication that they still haven't convinced you. Silence is not the absence of communication, it's the most unnerving form of it. When someone expects a reaction and receives nothing, their mind scrambles to fill the void. This is where psychological disarmament becomes surgical. Machiavelli understood that uncertainty is a sharper blade than insult. If you want to destroy someone's confidence, do not react when they speak. Do not frown. Do not nod. Do not even blink too quickly. Let your silence hover like a fog, and let them walk straight into it. Say nothing when they expect praise. Say nothing when they test your boundaries. The silence becomes a mirror they cannot read, and people fear what they cannot interpret. Your lack of response will echo louder than any criticism. It makes them wonder, did I say something wrong? Was that too much? Are they angry? Or worse, do they not care? That last question is the one that cracks the surface, because to be ignored is more wounding than being opposed. Opposition at least means you matter. Silence leaves them floating in irrelevance. If they ask, "What do you think?" Pause. Then change the subject. If they make a joke, let it fall flat, not with malice, but with indifference. The message isn't that they've failed, it's that their effort didn't even register, and that will haunt them. Because humans seek validation like oxygen. When it is denied subtly and consistently, the need becomes unbearable. They will replay every word they said, rehearse every gesture, try again, but softer, then louder, then desperate. You haven't attacked them, but they feel attacked, and it's a battle they can't win because there's no opponent in sight. Just the stillness of your unreadable face. In group settings, this tactic becomes even more effective. When others are met with warmth and attention, your silence becomes personal. It tells them, without saying a word, that they have fallen out of favor, and no one will say why. They begin to adjust themselves in real time, changing how they speak, choosing different words, looking for clues in your body language that do not exist. This is how you erode a person's center of gravity. You take away the cause and effect they depend on and replace it with quiet unpredictability. And once someone is unsure of how they're being perceived, they stop being confident. They start being cautious, then paranoid, then fragile. All because you never gave them what they needed most, a response. This is not silence. This is psychological control, wrapped in stillness and executed with precision. Group settings are where reputations are made or quietly destroyed. If you want to disarm someone's confidence without ever touching them, do it when others are watching, not with confrontation, but with stillness. When they speak with excitement, stay calm. When they grow animated, stay neutral. And when they raise their voice, lower yours. In a room full of people, contrast is power. Machiavelli knew that perception is not about who is loudest, but who controls the atmosphere. If you remain composed while someone else becomes reactive, the room will begin to shift in your favor. Calmness in public becomes a form of accusation. You don't have to say they're insecure or unstable. You let the difference between your stillness and their performance tell the story, and people will believe it, even if they can't explain why. The trick is to become a mirror, but one that reflects nothing back. Let them see their own reflection in your silence and realize how loud, how eager, how exposed they've become. Over time, this imbalance forces them into overcorrection. They start filtering every word. They begin hesitating before contributing. They second-guess the confidence they once performed so effortlessly. Because something has changed, and you made sure it happened when it mattered most, in front of others, you become the person people look to when the energy shifts. Your target becomes the one who always seems slightly off-key, slightly too much, slightly unsure of their footing. And the group notices, even if they don't say it. That's the brilliance of it. You don't fight for dominance. You let them lose it. By staying grounded, you force them into a spiral where they try to recalibrate their identity in real time. But the harder they try, the more obvious it becomes. You've placed them in a psychological maze where every turn leads to another dead end of doubt. And still, you've done nothing but remain steady. This is not about making them look bad. It's about making yourself the unshakable point of comparison. When you control your posture, your tone, your gaze, you command more than attention. You command interpretation. People assume you know something they don't, that you see through things others miss, that your silence is knowledge, not absence. And in this setup, your target becomes the one who always seems like they're trying to keep up. Confidence can't survive in the shadow of someone who never flinches. So while they talk too fast, laugh too loud, or try too hard, you sit still and let their reflection destroy them. To truly break someone without ever striking, use their own image against them. This is the mirror trick, subtle, quiet, and devastating. You don't challenge them. You simply reflect their insecurity in ways they can't deny. When they speak to impress, you don't interrupt or correct. You raise an eyebrow. You tilt your head. You respond with polite silence or a slight, unreadable smile. You let the echo of their own voice fill the space. The silence doesn't confirm their fear, but it doesn't relieve it either. That ambiguity eats at them. It forces them to re-watch the scene in their mind again and again, each time finding new flaws, new cracks, new reasons to question themselves. Machiavelli understood that perception is power, and the most damaging perception is the one you never clarify. The brilliance of this technique is that it's bloodless. You're not hostile, you're not rude, and yet you create a subtle tension that makes them unsure of who they are in your presence. If they tell a story meant to impress, you respond with a change of subject. If they make a joke that lands flat, you don't rescue them with laughter, you let the silence hold. If they express certainty, you offer none in return. Just enough pause, just enough absence. The message becomes clear without words. You see them differently now, or worse, maybe you always did. And now they're starting to see themselves through that same lens. That's how the mirror works. You don't insult their character, you make them examine it. The more they try to adjust, the more exposed they become. And the more exposed they become, the more unnatural their confidence appears to others. Eventually, They start to anticipate your reactions before they even speak. They'll say something and glance at you for approval, or hesitation, or relief, but you remain neutral. Their identity becomes tethered to your subtle cues, and that dependency is the leash. They want to know where they stand with you, but you offer no clear footing, and in that unsteady space, their confidence unravels. The strongest part of this tactic is its deniability. No one can accuse you of anything. You've been kind, respectful, perhaps even warm, but they can't shake the feeling that something isn't right, that they are being evaluated by a scale they don't understand and might never meet. This is psychological disarmament at its most refined. No raised voice, no bruised egos in the open, just a mirror, tilted ever so slightly, that shows them a version of themselves they no longer recognize. Let them overreach. That is how you finish the work you started. By now, they are already unsteady, questioning their value, recalibrating their tone, replaying every glance you didn't give. What comes next is not a confrontation. It is an invitation to fail. You offer them nothing but a vacuum, and they will rush to fill it. You stay quiet, and they start to explain. You don't praise, and they try to impress. You hold your silence, and they begin to overcompensate publicly, eagerly, and without restraint. This is where confidence collapses under its own weight, because in the pursuit of restoring their lost status, they will do too much. They will speak too long, take on tasks they can't complete, make promises they weren't prepared to keep. And you just observe, not with malice, not with amusement, just calm, unshaken presence. The same stillness that drove them into this spiral now becomes the silent witness to their undoing. Machiavelli understood that those who feel they are slipping in status will do anything to recover it, even sabotage themselves. You are not pulling them down. You are standing back while they climb a ladder with broken rungs, and the higher they go, the harder they fall. The beauty of this tactic is that the world sees only their mistakes, not your influence. You never asked them to prove anything. You never pressured them to perform. You simply created an absence of validation, of approval, of clarity, and let their own desperation do the rest. In group settings, this becomes even more brutal. The more they reach, the more transparent their effort becomes. People start to sense the insecurity underneath the performance. Their confidence no longer feels real, it feels forced, try-hard, unstable. And just like that, the room turns, not loudly, not cruelly, but collectively, and they feel it. You don't have to say a word. You already shaped the outcome. They will sit in the quiet after their overreach, scanning faces, wondering why it didn't land. They'll feel the shift, but won't know where it started. That's the cruelty of it. They think it's about them, their failure, their weakness. They don't realize it was a game they never knew they were playing. You didn't push them. You let them trip over their own performance. That is psychological disarmament at its peak. Not when you break someone, but when you make them break themselves, believing all along that it was their idea. The most powerful position in any room is not the loudest voice or the sharpest wit. It is the figure no one can quite reach, the one who stands just far enough away to be admired but never touched. If you want to destroy someone's confidence quietly, you must become that unreachable standard. Be excellent, but emotionally unavailable. Be present, but uninvested. Let your success speak loudly, while your reactions remain unreadable. Machiavelli would call this the power of controlled distance. It creates obsession in those who feel beneath you, and despair in those who try to match you. You do not reject their efforts outright. You simply never acknowledge them enough to satisfy. You do not give them the moment they're chasing. And so, they chase harder. They prepare longer. They rehearse their best self just to be near you. And every time they fail to crack your stillness, their self-perception takes another blow. This is how you become the measure of what they lack. When you remain calm under pressure, they feel exposed. When you don't rush to prove yourself, they start questioning why they're trying so hard. And when you succeed without showing need, they begin to resent their own desperation. The secret is not perfection, it's poised detachment. You succeed visibly but behave as if it means nothing. You receive attention but do not crave it. You are admired and yet remain unaffected. That contradiction makes people restless, and the one who is already doubting themselves will unravel trying to decode you. They'll compare their every move to yours, and because your expression never changes, they'll always feel behind. You've become the standard they never agreed to, but now feel forced to chase. That's the cruelty of it. You don't need to criticize them. You don't need to ignore them. You only need to exist in the same space, effortlessly, while they twist themselves into knots trying to match an energy you're not even offering. The more they reach for your level, the more it slips away, because they're reaching through insecurity, and you are standing in silence. Eventually, they stop trying to win. Not because they accept defeat, but because they start to believe they never stood a chance. Their confidence doesn't just weaken, it withers. Not from any blow you delivered, but from the illusion you maintained, that they were always a step behind something they could never quite name. You didn't fight them. You let them fight a shadow, and lose. By the time they break, no one remembers when it started. There was no argument, no insult, no scandal, just a slow unraveling. A change in tone, a shift in posture, a confidence once loud now barely whispers. And you did nothing. That is the final act of psychological disarmament, when the collapse looks like it came from inside them, and no one suspects you were ever involved. Machiavelli understood that the sharpest forms of power leave no fingerprints. You didn't confront, accuse, or humiliate. You simply withheld. You offered no certainty, no praise, no reaction. You were the steady presence, the calm contrast, the standard they could never meet, and in chasing you, they exhausted themselves. Their need to understand you, your silence, your detachment, your refusal to play by the emotional rules turned inward. Every overstep they took felt heavier. Every unreturned glance, every unanswered message, every compliment that landed flat chipped away at the image they had of themselves, until they no longer trusted it. That's the brilliance of this approach. They can't explain what you did, because technically you did nothing, and yet they feel hollow, embarrassed, diminished. They start avoiding eye contact. They stop contributing. Their voice becomes cautious. Their gestures smaller. The room feels colder to them, not because it changed, but because you never did. Your silence rewrote their place in the social hierarchy. They went from center to background without ever being pushed. You made their confidence collapse under the weight of its own need for validation. And the world saw no villain. That's the part no one teaches you, how effective quiet power really is. How withholding clarity can feel more brutal than confrontation. How the absence of recognition can starve someone's sense of worth. You didn't attack their strengths. You made them question if they ever had any. You never denied their voice. You just made it echo without response. You didn't push them to fail. You simply weren't there to catch them when they did. The greatest power isn't control through fear or force. It's influence through presence so quiet, so composed, that others destroy themselves, trying to match what you never offered. When they finally pull back, defeated, ashamed, uncertain of what went wrong, you remain calm, as if nothing happened, and to everyone else, nothing did. But to them, you became the mirror that never blinked, the one that reflected everything they hoped to be and everything they failed to become. You didn't break them. You just stopped holding the image together. Stay silent. Let them crumble. If this opened your eyes to the cold reality of power, subscribe for more strategies they hope you never learn. Like, comment, and join the dark blue circle. And remember, the quiet ones always win.